Good evening, everyone. Tonight, we're standing in a powdery hush on a front step where the wreath smells faintly of orange peel and clove. A ribbon tapping the door like it knows the code. While snow lifts off the streetlights and drifts back down as if practicing how to land. I'm balancing a paper bag of wrapped presents against my hip. A silver bell on the handle makes a sound small enough to keep secrets. Inside the house. Someone laughs in a way that isn't quite joyful, and in the moment before I knock, I can see my breath move like a little cloud that doesn't want to block the view. So before you get too comfortable, take a moment to like this video and subscribe, but only if you truly enjoy what I do here. And in the comments, tell me where you're listening from and what time it is. I like seeing our little constellation of night owls. Now, turn off the lights, maybe let a fan hum in the background, and let's begin tonight's journey together. The bell gives a soft two-note chime, and the door opens to cinnamon, evergreen, and the powdered sugar squeak of someone dusting cookies in a hurry. My daughter-in-law, Vivian, smiles like a photograph, surface bright, corners tired. One day early, she says, taking the bag and leaning in for a careful hug that manages not to touch. Her red sweater leaves a polite sparkle on my coat. Where's Caleb? I ask. In the back with the lights, she says, and a strand of tinsel clings to her sleeve like a clingy thought. I hear the television narrating a game I don't follow. A child's toy bleeding faintly in the next room, and then, distinctly, the sound a phone makes when someone forgets they've set it to speaker. Vivian turns her head toward the kitchen as if the oven had called her by name. The voice from the phone says, 3 million clears only if she signs before the new year. You delay, and we're a year out. There's the clink of ice, and then the voice again, gentler and uglier at once. You know how to nudge her. Vivian's eyes flick to me and then past me, training themselves to be casual. Let me just, she says, placing the bag on the console and stepping into the kitchen, where she slides the phone face down onto the counter as if that could make words unsaid. My heart lines up its pencils. Who was that? I ask. Too mild. Bank, she says, rinsing a bowl that didn't need rinsing. Holiday cutoffs, it's chaos. A footstep sounds on the stairs. The particular weight of a man who knows where the creek is and avoids it. My husband, Graham, clears his throat softly and comes down with a tie in his hand like he has just been trying it on. He's not supposed to be here. He's supposed to be finishing a late shift downtown, driving the quiet roads of December with talk radio for company. He looks from Vivian to me to the tree and back, and in that triangle the room loses half a degree of warmth. Mara, he says, smiling the smile people wear when they're auditioning for normal. Surprise. Light joke 1. To my own pulse, as I set my scarf on the banister, you are not a fire alarm. Please hush. It does not hush. I accept the stalemate and breathe like I'm teaching the air how to behave. There is a place in a woman's mind where the facts line up like garlands and decide, without a meeting, to keep their light steady. Vivian on speaker, 3 million. Before the new year, Graham on the stairs of my son's house. On a day he was elsewhere. Caleb, apparently outside, wrestling a light string that always worked until it met December. And me, holding a list that suddenly wants to be evidence. Elder wisdom reflection. My mother used to say it while digging her mittened hands into snow that would be ice by morning. When something startles your heart, don't sprint your mouth, walk your questions. You see more houses in the neighborhood that way. I walk my questions to the kitchen island and rest my palm on the cool stone. Traffic was a dream, I say to Graham, and he nods at a distance I could measure with a ruler. Vivian was just telling me about the bank. End of year, he says, the phrase trying on casual like a borrowed coat. Everyone's bustling. Quirky fact, because minds in snow like to hold on to something precise, for years. Tinsel was made of lead foil, Waits trees beautifully, absolutely not festive for lungs, until the early 1970s, when people remembered that sparkle doesn't have to be poisonous. I watch a strand shiver on the mantel, heavy in all the wrong ways. Caleb swings the back door open, flushed and bright. A strand of lights looped around his shoulders like an obedient snake. "Mom, you made it," he says, hugging me hard enough to prove to himself he's still in the story. He grins at Graham. "You two coordinated," he says, and the grin falters when he sees the way our faces don't match. I squeeze his hand, focus him back on bulbs and ladders. "Show me the outlet that misbehaves," I say, and he laughs because that is exactly the sort of thing I ask. We step onto the porch, and the snow is doing that beautiful, organized falling that looks like choreography and is just physics being kind. "Everything okay?" Caleb asks, as if everything could still be that simple. I tilt my head toward the kitchen window where Vivian is drying a bowl that doesn't need drying, and Graham is adjusting a knot that isn't on his neck. "We'll keep the porch lights on," I say, "and the breaker labeled." He frowns, then smiles because December asks that of people. "We test the outlet. It behaves." He heads back inside to retrieve a spare extension cord, and I let the porch hold me for a count of 24, which is how many plates I wrapped in tissue last night while an old movie talked me through courage without swords. When I go back in, Vivian has arranged my gifts under the tree with an efficiency that would be admirable in any other scene. Graham stands by the mantel. "Whitaker called," he says, naming our doctor with the ease of someone borrowing credibility. "He thought you should have a sleep aid for the holidays." Light joke too. Spoken to the mug on the stove so my voice can warm up before it becomes a sentence. I already own a sleep aid. It's called December. Then, to him. I'll let Dr. Whitaker tell me that himself. Vivian's phone vibrates again, the tiniest mechanical purr that still carries. She flips it with her thumb as if it accidentally flipped itself. And in the 2 seconds before the lock screen darkens, I see the top line preview. Transfer, 3,000,000. Deadline. It is, after all, human to need money. It is also human to choose weather for your soul. Academic phrase of the day, betrayal trauma. The public argument that when harm arrives from someone you rely on, the mind may delay or soften awareness to keep the relationship intact, which protects you while making you doubt yourself. A short-term adaptation with long-term splinters. I think of splinters catching sweaters, of how cautiously you dress when the woodwork has not been sanded smooth. We gather at the table because that is what holidays require. Cinnamon rolls I didn't bake. Coffee I didn't brew. Small talk ordered like safe appetizers. Caleb tells a story about the neighbor's inflatable reindeer collapsing with dignity. I laugh the way people laugh when they're busy not crying. Vivian offers me a plate, and I accept as if we weren't both holding a secret by the corners. Light joke 3. To the reindeer in the story. Gentle as a mitten. If a nap is a moral failing, I'm in danger. Caleb grins. Graham's eyes are measuring the room for exits. The clock practices its even, disinterested tick. You'll stay the night? Vivian says, smiling her photograph smile again. Santa logistics. I touch the napkin, the glaze, the fork. I need my own bed, I say, but I can help with stockings and the casserole first. Graham says he should get back to the office to free up tomorrow, and the sentence hangs like mistletoe in a doorway no one wants to walk through. Caleb asks if we can all meet at church in the morning, and we commit to it like adults who were once children who liked candles. The tree lights steady themselves, and for a moment we seem like a normal set of nouns: mother, son, father, wife, snow, cinnamon, music, and then the phone on the counter lights again with the patience of a machine that doesn't care whether you are ready. I help Vivian lay out dishes for tomorrow. Her hands are competent. So are mine. We fit lids,
Cover casseroles with foil. Label with a marker that has seen some things and still writes a clean line. You have a good system, I say, and it is half compliment, half question. She nods. A woman grateful to be seen doing something well. Systems are reliable, she says, as long as everyone follows the plan.
I put on my coat. Graham puts on his. We step into the early dark like people who mean to retrieve something and actually plan to drop it. Caleb hugs us both and returns to a tangle of tape and paper where hope lives until someone proofreads it. On the step, snow hushes the world to a volume I can live with. Tomorrow, Graham says. It is a promise that doesn't specify what it's promising. Tomorrow, I say, and let the air take the word apart until it's just a shape you can breathe through. Back in my car. The heater coughs into warmth. I press my gloved fingertips to the steering wheel and listen to the small pops of a house settling behind me, and the smaller pops of a story rearranging its furniture. I do not sprint my mouth. I walk my questions. And I begin, without anyone noticing, to label my days for the kind of truth that can stand in a room with a tree and not blink. I drove home with the heater whispering patience and set the wrapped presents on the hall bench like witnesses who weren't ready to testify. The house smelled faintly of orange peel, the good kind of holiday ache, and I let myself stand in that doorway long enough for my pulse to choose a chair. Then I made a list the way a nurse primes an IV. Slow, steady, with labels. 1. Appear a little tired. 2. Decline anything for sleep unless it's a lullaby. 3. Collect time. Photos, audio, dates, as if it were an ingredient you can measure. 4. Let tomorrow reveal whether the plan wants company.
Elder wisdom reflection. Stitched into my bones by my mother, who could fold tension into a fitted sheet when you're not sure what they want from you. Decide what you will give, on purpose, in teaspoons, with the spoon facing up. It turns out the world respects a measuring cup. I set a glass of water by the bed and talk to the ceiling as if it were a clerk who could stamp my intentions. I will not sprint my mouth. I will walk my questions. I will show up looking soft and be. Underneath, specific. Morning arrived in a hush that felt rehearsed. I put on a sweater that said approachable and shoes that didn't squeak. Tucked my phone into my coat pocket, already set to record, when the side button clicked, and slid a small notebook into my purse with a pen that writes like a promise. Light joke 1. To the pen as I tightened the cap, no flourishes, darling. This is not the opera. It agreed by being mid-blue and efficient. Church was full of pine and candles and the quiet choreography people do when they want to mean well. Caleb waved us into the pew he'd saved. Graham sat on the aisle, coat folded with excessive fondness for the lining. Vivian leaned forward to adjust the hymn book for me and whispered, too lightly, "You look pale. Did you sleep?" I angled my face toward the candlelight and let the truth be useful. "Lightly," I said. "This season keeps long hours." The homily ambled through hope and landed near kindness during the peace. Vivian pressed a small amber bottle into my hand the way people pass pepper at diners. Normal, practical, inevitable. "Dr. Whitaker recommends these," she murmured. "Half a tablet tonight. Holidays are hard." The label's font pretended to be helpful. I nodded as if gratitude were a liquid that couldn't slosh, then slipped the bottle into my coat pocket, screw side up, and let my phone camera memorize it while the choir found their pitch. After the service, we stepped into a glitter of cold air. Graham's hand brushed my elbow as if testing whether the hinge still worked. "We'll swing by later," he said. "Drop a few things." I smiled the small domestic smile you wear when you'd rather say, "The house has a new policy on deliveries." At home, I set the bottle on the kitchen island and photographed it with the newspaper masthead beside it. A poor woman's timestamp that the courts still understand. I opened my notebook and wrote, Vivian handed bottle in pew, dosage suggestion. Before the new year, still ringing. Quirky fact. Slipped in because my mind likes little anchors. Powdered sugar is usually about 3% cornstarch to prevent caking. Sweetness behaves better with a little structure. I underlined the cornstarch part twice and drew a box around it. Structure. Prevents caking. I called Dr. Whittaker's office and left a message in the patient portal a judge could read without blushing. I've been offered a sleep aid before I take anything. I'd like to discuss medication interactions and have vitals/labs for a holiday baseline. I did not write, and I'd like to see your handwriting on something besides a prescription pad. I brewed tea that told no lies, carried it to the table, and set the amber bottle beside a saucer as if it had asked for a seat. Caleb texted, photo of the tree finally agreeing to sparkle, followed by, Mom says dinner at 6. I sent back a thumbs up shaped like custom. Graham texted, want me to pick you up? I typed, I like my own car, then softened it with a snowflake emoji that said, this is seasonal, not hostile. I dressed at a pace that would calm a skittish horse and tucked a narrow strip of masking tape inside my coat. Tape is a confession waiting to be written. On the way out. I set the amber bottle in a zip bag, added the date, and slipped it into a cookie tin on the pantry shelf labeled pecans. The decoy bottle, vitamins in borrowed clothing, took its place in my purse. Vivian opened the door before I knocked, her smile already pinned. Soup's on, she sang. Stockings after. The house smelled like nutmeg and ambition. I kissed her cheek with the warmth owed to the mother of my grandchild and set my purse on the console where the mirror could watch it. In the kitchen, she lifted a ladle with choreography she likely practiced as a girl. Careful wrist, gentle pour. Half tablet after dinner, she said, voice dipped in concern. You'll thank me. I touched the fabric of her kindness and felt the stitching pull. Let's get through plates first, I said, and she nodded like a woman who knows patience is just another instrument. Graham hovered, attentive the way men become when they want to be helpless for your own good. You doing all right? He asked, offering a hand at a step I didn't need help with. I took it anyway. Evidence likes courtesy. We ate the soup and complimented the salt the appropriate amount. Caleb told a story about his co-worker's tree falling over at 3 a.m., and I laughed correctly at the part where a cat pretended innocence. When Vivian finally put the little tablet beside my water glass, I admired its neutrality. It's tiny, she said. Half will do more than you think. I lifted it between finger and thumb, turned it once like a jewel, and said, let me check it against my list. As if I were the responsible one in a room of improvisers. I pulled the decoy bottle from my purse, same shape, same sound, and read the label aloud in a mumble a human can't decode but a microphone can love. Then I dropped the tablet into my napkin, folded it into a small summer purse, and tapped it into the bag under the table. Light joke 2. To the napkin, as it accepted its assignment, secret keeping is not in your job description. Thank you for the stretch. Academic phrase of the day, testamentary capacity, the public argument that. For wills and big documents, the law asks whether a person understands the nature of their property, their heirs, and the consequences of signing. Critics caution that context, medications, and pressure can tilt those answers while still meeting formal checkboxes. I let the phrase sit beside the salt, context, medicine, pressure. 3 wise men with poor table manners. After coffee, Vivian set a manila envelope on the counter with the mild fanfare of a mail carrier. Housekeeping, she said lightly. Grown-up things. Graham stood a step too close to casual. Caleb reached for the stockings like a man choosing to decorate instead of detonate. We can do this later, I said, stroking the envelope like it was a cat no one should startle. Vivian's smile became a shade more lacquer. "It's just a draft," she said. Whitaker and the lawyer both suggested being proactive. "I love drafts," I said. "I'll have Elise look it over." Graham's mouth adjusted to a shape that did not belong on a holiday. "Elise?" he said. "You're calling a lawyer on Christmas Eve?" Light joke 3. Soft enough to pass customs. "Elise and I are modern women. We calendar merriment. She'll eat pie and then scold me for not reading the fine print." Caleb snorted. Vivian shifted tactics, thin paper over damp wood. "Of course," she said. "It can wait. It's nothing urgent." We hung stockings. I exaggerated a yawn, allowing a practiced softness to tug at my mouth. "I should go rest," I said. "Half a tablet." Vivian offered again, like a woman gently insisting on a scarf. "I'll text you in an hour to check." "You're kind," I said, and meant part of it, because kindness can be a habit even when it's being misused. At home. I opened the cookie tin and slid the napkin into a little envelope, wrote the date, and tucked it behind pecans. I placed the decoy bottle beside the sink, photographed it near the newspaper again, and wrote, "Half tablet offered twice, envelope presented, Elise tomorrow, Whitaker callback pending." I put the kettle on for honest tea and let the radiators hum a lullaby they didn't know I could hear, before sleep. I set my phone on the nightstand with the record toggle a thumb away. I placed my palms flat on the quilt and counted 7 slow breaths. The same number of houses on our street. The same number of plates I wrapped in tissue. The same number my pulse had taken to become conversational. Snow leaned against the window like a friend too polite to knock. I did not take the tablet. I did not declare a war I didn't need yet. I labeled a day. I folded a napkin. I let a bottle tell me its secrets. And I made room for tomorrow to show me who intended to sign what on my chest. The tree in the other house would glow whether or not anyone deserved it. I would, too. Snow made a sound like paper being turned as morning unfolded. I boiled water, wrote a clean list, and called Elise Garner. She answered on the 3rd ring with the calm of someone who keeps a suit jacket on the back of her chair and a soft sweater on the back of her heart. "Bring your notebook," she said. "In your kindest voice, we're going to ask for copies." Her office held lamplight that understood faces and a ficus that minded its own business. I placed the amber bottle on the desk beside yesterday's newspaper, the way a librarian checks a book back in. Elise read my notes. Pew handoff, manila envelope. Before the new year. Graham's stairway entrance, and said the sentence lawyers save for when the room needs a floor. We'll widen the circle of adults in the conversation. First call was to Dr. Whitaker's office. Elise requested a chart note. No sedatives or cognitive affecting meds prescribed or recommended without a documented face-to-face. All suggestions to be confirmed by me directly. We also scheduled a baseline with a cardiologist Elise trusts. Because holidays tug at pulse and narrative, she said, and I wrote down the name. Dr. Anika Rao. Second call was to our bank. We'd like copies of all signatures associated with the following accounts and any transfer request executed in the last 90 days, Elise said. We'll also need the audit trail for online logins. The manager, hearing law in the vowels, asked for an hour. We walked 2 blocks to the branch. The lobby smelled like carpet trying to be good. Light joke 1. To the pen on its little chain as I signed the release. You're doing important work for someone with limited range. Elder wisdom reflection. My grandmother whispered it while balancing a checkbook and a casserole in the same breath. When money starts speaking in riddles. Ask for receipts. Paper is the only adult at some tables. We sat with the manager, who slid out statements, signature cards, and a neat stack of transfer advice, slips printed on paper that thinks it's official. I compared signatures like a school teacher deciding which homework belongs to which child. Mine looked like me, rounded, patient. One line pretending to be me had the right letters but the wrong tempo, like someone humming a hymn they'd only heard once.
"Photocopies, please," Elise said, "and file notes on who keyed these in." The manager complied, professional face doing that small wins people can't help when their system disappoints them. Quirky fact for your pocket: the cheap gel pens at the grocery store are a quiet act of rebellion against check washing. Their pigment sits on the fibers like stubborn snow, harder to remove with solvents than the older dye inks that vanish at a whiff of acetone. I bought a box on the way out, labeled them "Do Not Borrow," and slid one into my purse like a decoy alarm. Back at Elise's, we spread the copies like a map in a good novel, 2 online transfers out of our joint savings, round numbers, end of day, an authorization request referencing a trust update I had not signed. A wire setup with my phone number listed oddly, 1 digit off, as if someone meant to keep me notified but not reachable. "We'll fix the alerts," Elise said, and looped in the bank's fraud team. Her voice pitched to the exact register that makes computers behave. "Also," she added, "let's have a pair of eyes outside ours." She sent a text that read like a door quietly unlocking, "Jonah Park, retainer, discreet." 10 minutes later, a man with snow on his coat and a camera bag that didn't brag stepped into the conference room. He poured his coffee the way careful people pour information. "Tell me what you want to confirm," he said, "and what you want to keep from confirming you." "Weeks," I said. "Hotels, if any, meetings that smell like secrecy, and call me if we cross from unfortunate into criminal." He nodded. "I'll start with phones and patterns, parking tickets, reward points, places that teach sin to look like errands." Light joke too. To the city map he unfolded. Tourism, but for truth. He smiled with half his face. Elise helped me draft 2 documents. A letter revoking any powers I hadn't granted with intention, and a simple notice to the family that read like a boundary in comfortable shoes. "Kindly note, I am reviewing my estate planning with counsel. No documents will be discussed or signed without Elise present. My medical decisions remain mine unless I name otherwise." We printed, signed with the gel pen that refuses to forget, and scanned. Paper learned my voice. By afternoon, the bank manager called back with an audit trail, IP addresses, timestamps, employee IDs. One login came from a device that wasn't mine while I was at choir rehearsal 2 Tuesdays ago. "We'll preserve this," Elise said, "and we'll add a second factor that calls only you." We changed passwords, set up alerts that pinged my phone and hers, and arranged for statements to be printed and held at the branch pending my pickup. No more disappearing PDFs at midnight. Jonah texted a photo of a hotel parking lot that had learned the faces of December, a certain sedan, Graham's, on Wednesdays at lunchtime, a second car that belonged to no one we loved, and a timestamp that put Vivian at yoga for an hour that smelled like room service. Then a second photo of a different hallway in a different business hotel. Carpet with an unfortunate pattern and a room number we could memorize. "I'll keep my lens kind," he wrote. "You'll have what you need, not more." Academic phrase of the day: marital waste. The public argument in family law that when one spouse spends joint resources on an affair or secret debts, the court may assign those losses to the spender rather than split them. Critics argue over proof thresholds and the messy line between private folly and financial harm. I didn't need the debate to be settled today. I needed the vocabulary to point my feet. Jonah also pulled credit headers, small, persistent cash advances in Graham's name, the sort that tell a story about someone who believes luck will change if he concentrates. "Casino?" I asked. "Or phone betting?" Jonah said. "The charges launder themselves to look like entertainment." He would say things like that, then go back to being quiet in a way that felt respectful of air. We added a stop at Dr. Rao's office.
Her waiting room did not try to sell me courage. It provided chairs that received people without editorializing. She read Elise's note, listened to my December in 3 paragraphs, and ordered a simple panel, blood pressure, EKG. Labs that would confirm I wasn't the kind of tired pills try to claim. Baseline buys you clean paper, she said. Also, drink water on purpose. I promised I would and believed myself. On the way home, I stopped at the branch, picked up the health statements like pastries, and drove to a quiet parking lot where you can hear your own breath under the heater. I traced the lines with my finger. Transfers out. Reference numbers pretending not to be breadcrumbs. I wrote the amounts into my notebook in my neatest hand. Because math cleans some kinds of fog. Light joke 3. To the glove compartment as it accepted one more envelope. You are now a filing cabinet that sometimes goes on field trips. It shut with a click that sounded like a small yes. Evening introduced itself with a sky that couldn't pick a color. I brewed tea that doesn't lie. Set the manila envelope from last night on my table. And slid the gel pen under the flap like a polite boundary. I texted Caleb a photo of the ornaments I'd hung in my kitchen, tiny wooden birds, 2 lemons, and got back a picture of his tree at last behaving fully. Over the top of the photo, he wrote, "Mom says save room for pie." I wrote back a heart and the word always. I did not call Graham. He called me. "Tomorrow we can finalize some adult things," he said. Choose your own euphemism voice jammed gently into gear. "Elise will be there," I said, polite as a folded napkin. There was a pause while he tried to decide whether my sentence had thorns. "Of course," he said. "Smart." Later. Jonah sent one more text, a shot of a stairwell camera catching the kind of hug that sells itself as necessity. The timestamp lined up with a withdrawal. I saved it into a folder named after something ordinary, cookbooks. People don't go rifling there unless they need dinner. The house breathed with me. I wrote in my ledger, bank copies in hand, signatures that don't match, alert set, Hotel Wednesdays, Dr. Rao Baseline Tuesday, Elise present for all signatures, bottle preserved, napkin secured. I added one more line because it felt like oxygen. I'm not sprinting my mouth. I'm walking my questions. And now they are walking beside professionals with warm hands. Outside, the snow learned how to stop. Inside, paper learned how to speak. I turned off the lamp. Let the refrigerator hum the note that means we'll keep what needs keeping, and set the gel pen beside my pillow like an usher with a flashlight. Tomorrow we'll ask for a sequence. I'm ready to give it sentences in the right order. The next evening arrived wrapped in tomato and basil, the kind of dinner smell that means someone wants the conversation to happen where forks can keep hands busy. Vivian had set the table with cloth napkins that meant business. Graham hovered like a man auditioning for the role of reassuring. Caleb poured water, steady, generous. Not yet sure which thirst we were about to address. I'd brought a bakery box and a thin wooden letter opener tied with twine, the old-fashioned kind my mother called a paper knife. I set both by my plate, the way people put their tools where the light is good. "For mail tomorrow," I said mildly, "and slices later." The room tried to decide whether that was a joke. We ate first because I insisted. I let the lasagna remind my body it belonged to me no matter what followed. Light joke 1, to the bubbling edges as Vivian set the pan down. "Please stop at comforting and do not attempt my origin story." Caleb grinned. A fork clinked in agreement. Elder wisdom reflection. Ladled to me long ago by a woman who could fix most emergencies with butter and a list if you expect to be cornered. Choose a room with windows and feed people before anyone reaches for a pen. Hunger dramatizes. Adequate pasta humbles. We cleared plates. And Vivian produced a manila envelope as if it were a utensil we'd forgotten. "Housekeeping," she said.
Light voice with iron hidden where the vowels bend. Graham slid closer, elbow grazing the page as if to warm it. Simple updates, he said. Smart to do before the year turns.
I pulled the bakery box closer and lifted the lid just enough to let the smell of cinnamon announce itself. Dessert, I said. But first, process. I took out my letter opener, turned it once in my fingers, and rested the blade on the envelope's glued seam without quite pressing. We do this with Elise present, I said. You know that. Graham had rehearsed his lines. She'll only slow things down. He put a hand on the envelope as if to keep it from escaping. This is straightforward. Sign here, here, initial there. It's proactive. The words tried to sound like a smoke detector that knows the house isn't on fire but wants you to evacuate anyway. Good, I said. Proactive is a cousin to prepared. And prepared looks like Elise on speaker, a notary we didn't pull from a hat, and a day when no one urges sleep aids between the salad and the signature. The room cooled a fraction. Vivian's mouth became a straight geometry problem. Mara, she said, no one is pressuring you. We just want everything settled. She slid the papers an inch nearer, then, sugar for the goat, pushed a small amber bottle toward my water. Half a tablet later, for nerves. I reached for the bottle as if it were polite to accept salt even when the soup's fine. My phone, face down on the table, listened without interrupting. Thank you, I said. I had Dr. Rao order a baseline. It turns out my pulse doesn't belong to December. I let the sentence rest, like a bread dough that will rise whether anyone approves.
Quirky fact for the table. Tucked into the pause, the way a lemon wedge corrects excess. What we now call a letter opener used to be a paper knife, made to slit uncut pages and open envelopes before glue became reasonable. It looks ceremonial, but really it's a tool that says, I will read what's actually written, not what I guess is inside. I tap my little blade against the manila sleeve. Old implements, I said, for modern assumptions. Graham glanced at Caleb as if help might be retrieved from his son's face. Caleb, to his credit, looked at me instead. Mom, what is it? He asked, and the question belonged to an adult who has decided not to be a hallway anymore. I turned the envelope toward the light and saw the corner of a draft that wanted to be confident about itself. It's what it always is, I said gently. Words asking for the future to consent to a plan the present still has questions about. Academic phrase of the day, foot in the door effect. The public argument that if someone gets you to agree to a small, reasonable request, you are statistically more likely to accept a larger one right after, especially in rooms with social pressure and warm lighting. The first foot is usually called housekeeping. The second is it's just initials. The third is a staircase. I'd like Elise on speaker, I repeated, and dialed before anyone could nominate a different order of operations. She answered on the second ring with courtroom calm. You're on a holiday table with lasagna, I said. We have a manila envelope that thinks it's urgent. Put me near the light, Elise said. I set the phone among the water glasses. No one signs anything without my eyes, she said mildly to the room. We're practicing good habits. Vivian's smile went taut. We're not villains, she said, shaping the word like a pastry she hoped would bake into something else. We're trying to simplify. Elise hummed assent to the concept and asked to hear what the draft contained. Graham hesitated, then slid the top page free. It's a trust amendment, he said. Streamlining, less clutter. Read me the clauses near distribution and incapacity, Elise said. He started, stumbled at the phrase, upon attending physician's opinion, then changed the subject to beneficiary alignment. Elise let the silence be punctuation. We'll need to slow this down, she said. Terms are wearing costumes. Light joke to the cinnamon rolls, as I nudged the box open like a peace offering. You don't have to testify, you just have to be warm. Caleb laughed once, grateful for a valve that let the room breathe.
I set the letter opener down and reached for a napkin. "Caleb," I said, "could you do me a kindness? Snap a photo of the first page for Elise's email. Angle it so the header reads clear." He did without drama. Graham objected without words. Vivian exhaled through her nose the way people do when their choreography gets interrupted by the fire code. Elise's voice stayed honeyed steel. "Thank you. That's enough for now," she said. "Mara, you'll bring the full draft tomorrow. No signatures tonight. And to whoever thought of a sleep aid, please do not mix pharmaceuticals with legal documents. That cocktail stains."
Graham's eyes went flat, the way ponds go when wind gives up. "You've made this adversarial," he said to me, as if I had invented gravity to annoy him. "I've made it adult," I said. "There's a difference." We ate dessert. Vivian didn't. She stared at the paper knife like it might teach a class. Caleb refilled everyone's water with the solemnity of a deacon. The clock ticked in a tone that dared us to believe in order, when we'd boxed leftovers and located lids in a spirit of fragile ecumenism. Graham tried again. "We could do signatures at the notary tonight," he said, brightly casual. "Grocery stores open late." I pictured the fluorescent aisle where dignity goes to bargain. "No," I said gently. "Tomorrow. Elise's office, 9:30. You're welcome to bring your own counsel." Light joke 3, to the refrigerator as I slid in the pan. "You are the only impartial party here. Please store neutrally." The shelf did its quiet work. At the door, Vivian handed me a bag of cinnamon rolls I hadn't asked for, and a look I recognized from women who have invested too much in an outcome to remember how to stand up without it. "Drive safe," she said. "Please sleep." I met her eyes and let kindness walk to the edge of the property line. "You too," I said. "Rest will help tomorrow read like tomorrow." Outside. The air had a sound like paper being torn very carefully along its perforation. My car warmed. My hands slowed. I set the bakery box on the passenger seat like a harmless witness and placed the manila envelope beneath the letter opener for safekeeping. I texted Elise, "Thank you for being a window." She replied with a gavel emoji and a snowflake. Then, blessedly, nothing. At home. I slid the draft into a clear sleeve, dated it with the gel pen that refuses erasure, and added it to my growing binder labeled December Adulting. I wrote in my ledger, "Dinner happened. Envelope attempted. Elise present by voice. No signatures. Sleep aid offered again. Cinnamon rolls deployed as charm." I put the letter opener in the drawer where tools that look like jewelry live and turned off the kitchen light. Tomorrow would need chairs, copies, and coffee that doesn't lie. Tonight needed quiet. The house breathed. The snow agreed to fall where we could watch it. I pressed my palm to the cool countertop, and the stone did what stone does, held steady while the room learned how to. Morning wore a steady gray that made paper look important. I drove to Elise's office with the manila envelope on the passenger seat and the little paper knife resting on top like a chaperone. Her lobby smelled faintly of ink and citrus. The ficus still minded its own business. Elise met me with 2 mugs and a yellow pad that had already decided it would be on my side. Elder wisdom reflection, handed down by a woman who could fix a week with a clipboard. When people feel slippery, make time solid. Put appointments on paper, put signatures where witnesses can see, and let the calendar carry what your voice shouldn't have to repeat. I breathed like a clerk and unclipped my pen. We began with the draft Graham and Vivian had floated. Elise read it in a tone that translated polite phrases back into their native language. Streamlining, it said where it meant rerouting. Proactive, where it meant hurry. Attending physician, where it meant the easiest gate. Elise placed the papers in a clear sleeve. "No one returns these until they know we can read," she said. Then she slid me a thin stack of our own making. "We set the scaffolding," she said. "Revocable trust for the house and accounts. Successor co-trustees, me and the bank. Not family. A cooling period No amendments without 48 hours review and a video record with independent counsel present. Springing power of attorney naming a neutral fiduciary, not your spouse. Triggered by 2 independent physicians, neither of whom can be Dr. Whitaker. Light joke 1. To the blue pen, as it lay across the signature lines, "You are not allowed to perform jazz today. Stick to the melody." The pen behaved. We signed and initialed where prudence asked, with the notary witnessing like a lighthouse, bright, without drama. Elise filed immediate notices with the bank, 2 signatures required for transfers over a threshold, alerts to me and her, statements held at branch for pickup. "We're not barring the door," she said. "We're installing a peephole." Dr. Whitaker called while the ink was drying. Elise tapped speaker. His voice did the soft shuffle of a man who has been asked to be casual by people who like fog. "I hear there's concern," he said. "I never formally recommended anything, just suggested rest." I smiled at the yellow pad so my voice would come out the way I wanted it. "Then you'll be happy to put a note in my chart," I said. "That no sedatives are indicated and that any cognitive affecting medication would be discussed with me face to face." He cleared his throat. "Of course, the holidays can be a lot." "They can," I said gently, "and I prefer tea." Quirky fact for your mental pantry: manila envelopes were originally made from abaca, manila hemp, a banana plant fiber strong enough to resist tearing and salt air. The paper got its name from the port that shipped the strength. I ran a thumb along the envelope's edge and liked the idea that I was carrying something designed for travel and weather. At 10:30, we walked 2 blocks to Dr. Anika Rao. Her clinic was arranged by someone who believes in chairs with decent backs and lamps that don't audition for theater. Vitals first. Blood pressure that belonged to a woman who sleeps with a clear conscience. EKG that looked like dot to dot for a careful child. Dr. Rao listened without interrupting. "We'll do a simple lab panel," she said. "Electrolytes, thyroid, CBC. You're allowed to be tired in December. You're not obligated to be sedated." She printed a letter for my file. Patient presence alert, oriented. Baseline vitals, normal. No medical indication for sedative prescription today. Light joke 2. To the EKG machine as it spat out its paper ribbon. "Thank you for not improvising cliffhangers." It whirred, unamused but faithful. Academic phrase of the day: choice architecture. The public argument that the way options are arranged, timing, lighting, who's present, what's on the table, nudges decisions, raising the ethical debate about when a nudge becomes manipulation. Sleep aid plus signature at the kitchen counter is a nudge with an agenda, Dr. Rao said dryly. A doctor's office with water and questions is a nudge toward consent. I folded her letter and slid it into the binder labeled December, Adulting. Consent prefers binders. Back at Elise's. The bank manager joined us on video and confirmed the new guardrails. 2 signatures for transfers over 20,000. Alerts to both of you. In-person pickup for certain statements. Employee notes flagged for any inquiries from non-owners. We also added a note, no address or phone updates without my signature in ink at the branch. The manager's face did that small relieved thing that happens when a system is finally pointed at the right problem. "We'll keep an eye," she said, and I almost thanked her for the metaphor. Jonah Park arrived with a paper bag of bagels and a face that had decided to tell only one truth at a time. "I have a timeline for you," he said, and laid out a neat sequence. Wednesdays at a business hotel near the Loop, Graham. Thursdays, yoga that checked in as room service, Vivian. 3 cash advances at an ATM that doesn't like to have its photo taken. A loyalty points printout that thought it was private. 2 receipts for dinners charged to a room that was not mine. "I haven't photographed faces," he said. "Hands, doors, cars, clocks. It's enough to point without humiliating." I thanked him for the courtesy as much as the content. We organized. Elise made tabs: medical, financial, legal, timeline, audio. I added chain of custody because paper likes formal introductions. In the timeline, I slid the pew handoff, the manila at dinner, the before the New Year call, the bottle with the newspaper, my refusal recorded by a napkin doing the Lord's work in audio. A calm clip of my voice reading the tablet label out loud so a future listener could follow the breadcrumb trail in financial, the held statements and the odd digit phone number in medical, Dr. Rao's letter and a copy of the chart note Dr. Whitaker had now, bless him, actually signed. The binder felt like a nervous system that finally had some myelin. Light joke 3. To the stapler as it closed around a stack that had stopped wriggling, "You are the only one here allowed to pinch." The stapler complied with a satisfying click. "What next?" Elise asked. I exhaled through my nose like a kettle that has decided not to whistle. "We invite them to a neutral table when we're ready," I said. "Not to sign, to talk, somewhere polite with witnesses who think they're waiters." Jonah nodded. "I have 3 restaurants with cameras that keep good time and staff who mind their own business," he said. "You bring your paper knife. I'll bring a lens with manners." We set dates as if we were setting bones. Tomorrow, file the trust, swap beneficiary designations, pick up hard copies at the branch. Next week, lunch invitation to Vivian. Something she can't resist, like a private room and the word lasagna written by a chef the food blogs gossip about. Elise would sit 2 tables away with a seltzer. Jonah would be a man with a book. I would be an older woman who looks a little tired and entirely clear. Before I left, Elise pressed a small fireproof pouch into my hand. "Medical letter, trust excerpts, bank guardrail confirmations," she said. "Keep 1 set at home, 1 off-site." I tucked it into my tote and felt my shoulders join the project. On the drive. Snow turned to rain and then back to snow like the sky couldn't pick a mood. At the branch, I showed ID, signed 2 lines in blue that won't wash, and picked up my printed statements. The teller slid over a little envelope of alerts with a smile that recognized my name without getting too friendly. At home. I put the pouch in the back of the pantry, behind pecans, beside rice, and taped a note to the inside of the cabinet where mugs breathe, "Call Elise," before signing anything. Dr. Rao letter, Oaks, front pocket, tea first. I brewed tea that doesn't lie and flipped the manila envelope from last night upside down, tracing the seam with the paper knife but not cutting. I wrote 3 lines in the ledger on the fridge. Scaffold built. Trust. Co-trustees. Cooling period. Medicine moved back into its lane. Baseline. Chart note. Money taught new manners. 2 signatures. Alerts. Branch only changes. Then I added a 4th. Tomorrow we practice being ordinary. Laundry. Soup. A walk. Because ordinary is where predators get bored and evidence gets brave. I texted Caleb, "Dinner here tomorrow, low key." He replied with a thumbs up and the word low typed twice, which I took to mean he wanted a room that didn't test him. I told the house aloud, in that soft bedtime voice I've been practicing. We are a place that reads things before we cut them open, that drinks water on purpose, and that remembers which tools are for bread and which are for paper. The kitchen agreed in its quiet way. The snow chose a shape and stuck with it, and my binder, on the table under the lamp, looked like a spine doing its job. The next day was obedient and ordinary on purpose. I walked the block while the gray sky practiced being decisive, started a pot of soup that asked nothing dramatic of the onions, and folded towels the way you line up small truths until they look like a path. I swept the kitchen in slow figure 8s and felt the house settle into the new muscle memory. Call Elise first, drink water on purpose, put pens where promises live. Light joke 1, murmured to the mop as it cooperated. You and I are the quietest revolutionaries in this zip code. The mop did not argue. Jonah texted at 10 with a timeline that clicked into place like a seatbelt. Wednesday lunch, business hotel, he wrote, sending a photo of hands entering a room and a receipt for 2 entrees charged to a number we now recognized. Thursday, yoga, same block, different lobby, followed by a loyalty points screen that behaved like a confession wearing a sweater. Then, ATM, 3 advances, same machine, 20 minutes apart. I forwarded the timestamps to Elise. She filed them with her honeyed steel. Paper learned to walk in sequence. Elder wisdom reflection. Inherited from an aunt who played chess with grocery lists. Choose the table and the clock. If you want the truth to show up, set the appointment in daylight. Ask on a full stomach. And sit where you can see both the door and the dessert menu. Predators like corners, adults like windows. I opened my planner and drew a square around Thursday at 1, lunch. Not dinner. A restaurant with cameras that keep good time and a private room that still has a window. I typed a text to Vivian and erased it twice. Kind without flattery, specific without bait. Finally, would love to treat you to lunch. Thursday, 1 o'clock. La Fiora. I'd like us to talk logistics, calmly. She replied faster than I expected, the way people do when they've been rehearsing yes. Perfect, she wrote. I'll make sure we're uninterrupted. I set my phone face down and exhaled, the sound a kettle makes when it remembers it isn't obligated to whistle. Elise and I walked the plan like we were checking fence posts. She would sit 2 tables away with a club soda and a notebook that easily passes for a menu. Jonah would become a man with a book near the host stand, hat brim low, lens kinder than necessity. My job, arrive early, ask for the window. Choose a tablecloth that reflects a face without making it look guilty. And order first so the script doesn't choose my verbs for me. No alcohol, Elise added. Ask for sparkling water in a wine glass with lime. You'll look festive and drive nowhere. I wrote, sparkling. Lime in my notebook like a witness list. Quirky fact to tuck in my sleeve. Fine porcelain rings at a high. Clean note when you tap it lightly. Molecules arranged in a crystalline network that behaves like a tiny bell. Earthenware answers duller. I tried it at home with a teacup, listening to the bright ping and thinking of how people try to pass off dullness as clarity. At La Fiora, the cups are porcelain. The room will sing if handled correctly. It's a silly comfort, but I collect those, too. Caleb texted from work. Dinner still low? Low squared, I replied, and added a pot of rice to the stove, as if it were possible to boil anxiety into something fluffy and honest. Graham did not text. Good. Silence tells the truth when it's got nothing left to sell. I gathered tools the way I gather recipes into the tote. The little paper knife, not to use, to remember to read. The binder, medical, financial, legal, timeline, audio. A slim recorder that doubles as a lipstick and only wakes when I press my thumb. And 2 gel pens that refuse solvents. I tucked Dr. Rao's letter into the front pocket. The way you tuck a friend's phone number into your palm before a hard meeting. Light joke too. To the recorder as it settled beside the spoon in my bag, your ambition is to capture sentences, not to stage them. It pretended not to feel flattered. Jonah tested the restaurant at 4, sending me a floor plan scribble and a note. Back left banquette. Closest to the window, good audio off the glass. Camera on ceiling points there at a friendly angle. He added a grainy still of yesterday's lunch crowd so I could see how jackets drape, how the light behaves on silverware. We're not doing theater, he wrote. We're doing documentation with good manners. Academic phrase of the day, coercive control. The public argument that a pattern of isolation, surveillance, gaslighting, and rulemaking can capture a person's freedom without a bruise, and that the law should treat those patterns as harm even when no single event screams. Naming it helps. When a kitchen becomes a stage and a pill bottle becomes a prop. You are not overreacting to the scene.
You are noticing the script. I walked the house before dusk and gave it its lines. The binder waited on the table under the lamp, tabbed and calm. The cookie tin labeled pecans held the napkin with the tablet I didn't take, dated in my careful hand. The fireproof pouch sat in the pantry behind rice and beside truth. I taped a fresh note inside the mug cabinet. Thursday, La Fiora, window, sparkling lime. Read, don't perform. The coffee maker sighed its approval. Vivian pinged me a half hour later with a flourish. Chef does a wild boar lasagna that's basically church, she wrote. And I smiled because I understood the move. When people want your consent, they lead with reverence. I'll be there early, I replied. I like to say thank you to the room. Caleb arrived for our low dinner with the kind of grin that interrupts a day's momentum. He brought a paper star he and a coworker had folded out of a coffee bag and held it up to the light, like a boy testing stained glass. Mom's working late, he said, shucking his coat without his eyes doing the old scan of the room's weather. We ate soup and rice and watched the first 15 minutes of a movie that doesn't need anyone to be a hero, he asked. You good? The way grown children ask when they're ready to hear both answers. I'm practicing, I said. He nodded like a man who understands rehearsal is part of courage and took the trash out without making a speech. After he left, I laid out tomorrow's kindness, a scarf that keeps my voice warm, shoes that apologize to no staircase, a jacket with pockets that always remember where the recorder hides. I ironed a handkerchief because my grandmother would insist, and because small rituals are the spine of complicated days. Light joke 3. To the iron as it exhaled, we press wrinkles. We do not interrogate them. It steamed, law-abiding. I slept lightly, not because I doubted the plan, but because the body does its inventory at night. In the morning, the kitchen remembered everything, the kettle humming its B-flat, the calendar bowing to Thursday, the binder waiting like a calm chorus. I sent Jonah a single word, confirmed, and Elise a heart made of parentheses, because punctuation is how I pray. I arrived at La Fiora 12 minutes early, the precise window where you're courteous without appearing eager. The host smiled like a person who's been taught to consider everyone potentially important and led me to the window. The porcelain cups gave their brief bright ping when the server set them down. I asked for sparkling with lime in a wine glass and watched the bubbles practice being festive without making decisions for anyone. I set my tote beside me and placed the little paper knife on the table as if it were an heirloom. Not to scare, to remind myself that reading comes before cutting. Through the glass, I watched a city that has learned how to mind its own business. In the reflection, I saw Jonah reading a book he might actually be reading, and Elise appraising a menu as if it were a contract. I put my palms on the tablecloth and told my pulse. You are not a fire alarm, you are an instrument. We play scales first. Vivian swept in on time. Hair in a knot that announced competence. Coat the color of wine people like to be seen holding. She kissed my cheek with the careful warmth of someone greeting both a relative and a witness. You look good, she said. You look punctual, I answered. And the room, blessed, kept its mouth shut. We ordered, her, a glass of red, me, my festive water, both of us the lasagna she'd already sold me on, a salad that promised to behave. I asked about Caleb's schedule and listened. She asked if my sleep had improved and watched my water. I thanked the server for the bread in a voice that made gratitude the only performance we were staging. And then I touched the little paper knife with one finger and asked the question I had smoothed all night. What's the hurry for before the new year, Viv? The glass found her mouth. The room found its ceiling. The porcelain did not ring. She smiled the way people smile when their screen goes black in the middle of a movie. You know how banks are, she said. Cut-offs, taxes. I let the smile hang and then lowered it into daylight. We'll read everything together, I said. With Elise. I kept my hands visible, my voice at nap level. And if there's anything you'd rather say before we read, now's a good window. Outside, a bus hissed like a stagehand cueing a scene change. Inside. The recorder in my pocket remained a citizen. The lasagna arrived, fragrant and sincere. I picked up my fork. I chose to chew before the truth began talking. Sometimes you give the truth a chance to compress its paragraphs. Vivian let the fork idle over the lasagna like a metronome that had lost its baton. I took a small bite first, so the room would trust me. Light joke 1. Breathed toward my plate so only the porcelain could hear. No cross-examination until after the salad. The fork agreed by not scraping. Taxes, she repeated, as if that one word could host the whole dinner. Deadlines. The buyout window closes December 31st. If we miss it, we lose leverage. She lifted her glass and watched the sides weep. It's just good sense. Quirky fact. Set down gently where her gaze had gone. Wine legs aren't a sign of quality at all. They're surface tension tricks made by alcohol evaporating faster than water, high alcohol, warmer room, more legs. Salesmen sell poetry to a physics problem. She swirled again, reassured by the wrong thing. Good sense, I said, and touched the little paper knife with one finger. Then help me understand the hurry that needed a pill in a pew. The room made that cooperative hush-good restaurants practice. Outside the window. The bus exhaled, patient as tide. She kept her eyes on the glass. You've always been delicate around holidays, she said. Each word pressed in place like a tile that didn't quite match. Graham thought you'd sleep better. We all do better with rest. Elder wisdom reflection. The kind my mother could fold into pie crust when someone offers you a shortcut through your own mind. Take the longer road on purpose. Slow forks. Slow breath. Slow pen. Only lost maps demand speed. I set my fork down like consent had weight. Whitaker never recommended anything, I said. Rao ran a baseline yesterday. No medical reason I need help understanding paper. We'll read with Elise. If the plan is good, it will survive daylight. Vivian's smile thinned, then tried again. Mara, there are adults with access issues. The bank wants clarity. Caleb deserves... She stopped herself one word from brave. We deserve a clean file before the new year. 3 million, I said, not loud, just accurate. Who collects it if signatures behave? Her pupils narrowed like a camera deciding how much to show. It consolidates, she said. Less clutter. She speared a corner of lasagna as if working through a document. Graham's accounts, some estate cleanup, alignments. Alignments at a hotel on Wednesdays, I asked, or at yoga on Thursdays? I cut the lasagna's edge with the side of my fork as if documents could be softened by sauce. Across the room. Jonah turned a page he might actually have been reading, by the bar. Elise examined her seltzer like it might turn into a kloss. The tiniest tick at Vivian's jaw. You hired someone, she said, a shimmer of admiration hidden under the disapproval. Of course you did. Of course I did, I said, because households leak, and because someone told someone on speaker that everything clears if I sign before the year turns. She rested the glass down too carefully. Money's ugly, she said. You could help make it less so. By becoming sleepier around envelopes? I took a sip of the festive water and let the lime perform restraint. No, we ate. Because bodies can be wiser than conversations. Halfway through. She sighed like a woman finally taking off tight shoes. He's underwater, she said. Not just us. Gambling, maybe. Stupid money. The 3 is a fix. We clean it now. We get to breathe. She glanced toward the ceiling camera like it were a skylight. You won't even feel it. I will, if I'm sedated, I said. And later, when my name shows up as having consented to math I never met.
She pushed the plate away. Appetite traded for argument. "You think I'm a villain?" she said. "No question mark. I'm a pragmatist. Marriages carry mess. Families distribute it. You could lift the corner. I'll lift the paperwork," I said, "and the pen, and the phone to call Elise. I'll lift my own glass, water, not wine, while we read. I'll lift what belongs to me." She laughed once, humorless. "You always liked rules." "I like nouns," I said. "They behave." She leaned in, the kind of lean that wants to pinch a wrist. "Do you know what happens if you refuse? The bank will freeze, vendors will panic, we'll bleed on fees. Caleb loses the down payment on the house he's trying to buy next spring. Everybody pays for your caution." Academic phrase of the day. Financial elder abuse. The public argument that helping with accounts. Signatures, or streamlining, can mask exploitation. Scholars and lawmakers argue over mandatory reporting, autonomy versus protection, and how to measure consent when power and dependency skew the room. I let the term sit between the bread and the salt. "What you're describing," I said, "sounds like urgency auditioning as care." She tipped her head, conceding a point she wouldn't keep. "You sound like a podcast." "Like a person reading what's actually printed," I said, and laid the paper knife across the napkin like a closing argument that refuses volume. The server returned. Porcelain rang its clean little bell as plates were lifted. Light joke, too. To my napkin as it slid into my lap for a union break. "You work harder at secrets than you signed up for." It accepted the compliment by being very good at catching crumbs. "Tell me the deal," I said, and I kept my voice at bedtime. "Who wants the signatures? Which accounts move? What does Whitaker sign if you go through with the kitchen counter plan? And who meets you in the hotel on Wednesdays?" Her eyes flashed a weather front. "You're recording this," she said. "Not accusation, inventory." "Of course I am," I said. "It keeps us both honest." She turned her palm up, the way some gamblers do when a hand goes sideways. "There's a trust," she said. "Old. Your parents' house sale rolled into it ages ago. A clause that unlocks if the primary adjusts distributions to match current caregiving needs." She swallowed. "That needs your signature." "The amendment our friend drafted." "The one in my binder?" I asked. Her jaw clicked. "Adds clarity," she finished, not bravely. "Graham handles things while you rest." A beat. "The 3 gets wired to clean lines. He makes people stop calling." "People like the card folks?" I said. "And the hotel points people, and the other car's registration." She closed her eyes. Once. Like a child who hears a train through the night and hopes it's a storm. "I didn't want to be the bad guy," she said, small. "I wanted to be the one who saved the family from paperwork." "You can still be someone who chooses paperwork that tells the truth," I said. "You can also be someone who stops adding adjectives to sleep." She looked at my water like it offended her. "You won't sign," she said. "I will," I answered. "After Elise reads. After Dr. Rao's letter sits on the table. After we move every chair into daylight." I let my fingertips rest on the tablecloth so the recorder could borrow their steadiness. "And after you tell me you understand what 3 million means to the people who didn't earn it." Her mouth tightened, then opened. "It means not waking up at 4 with a heart that sounds like a shoe in a dryer," she said. "It means not moving because of a once-in-a-decade rent hike. It means not watching your husband try to borrow dignity." The last sentence came out truer than she intended, and hung between us like a string of lights that hadn't decided whether to work. "Then tell the truth," I said. "Say the words that match the rooms." She rubbed her temple. "We were going to do it gently," she said. "Half a tablet for Christmas Eve, a quarter on Christmas, a notary at the market. The kitchen counter is better than a lawyer's table when people get nervous." She took a breath. "The hotel wasn't love. It was hiding." A pause, a bleak half smile. "Sometimes hiding wears perfume." I touched the paper knife, not because I needed it, but because rituals help. Here's what happens instead, I said. Elise will invite you and Graham to her office. We'll read. We'll correct. We will not do medicine for paperwork. If the bank wants clarity, we'll give it a laminated handbook. If someone threatens fees, we'll give them Elise on a speakerphone. Her shoulders lowered an inch. You'd still help? She asked, mistrusting relief. I'll help with the adult parts, I said, not the parts that require me to be less awake. A server cleared a glass at the next table. The tiny chime of porcelain did its bright, indifferent ringing. Across the room. Elise's gaze lifted. Eye contact. No nod. Jonah turned another page. Vivian stared at her hands as if they were writing messages without permission. Graham won't like it, she said. Graham can choose, I said. He can bring his own counsel, or he can keep trying the kitchen counter method and meet Detective Salazar sooner than dessert. Her eyes flicked up. Detective? We're widening the circle, I said. Quietly, politely. Light joke 3. Offered to the busser who caught a shard of silence with a practiced hand. He deserves hazard pay for secrets. The busser smiled without understanding and kept the table even. The check arrived. I reached for it. My treat, I said, for the lasagna that didn't lie. She let me, and that, strangely, felt like the first honest thing she did. We stood. She hesitated, then hugged me in a shape that didn't try to borrow absolution. I'll tell him, she said, meaning both of us, meaning many kinds of telling. And you'll bring the binder. I'll bring the binder, I said. You bring the truth. Outside, the city had decided on snow again. I texted Elise one word, recorded, and Jonah another. Enough. I put the paper knife back in my bag, the little weight of it reminding me that reading comes first. In the glass. I saw a woman who had eaten her lunch, kept her voice soft, and asked for daylight. The room behind me rang one last bright porcelain note. As if to mark the hour, the story stopped pretending. By the time I reached the corner, snow had changed its mind again and returned to rain, as if the sky were practicing both stories to see which one fit. I sat in the car under the metronome of the wipers and sent 2 messages. Elise, recorded, ready when you are. Jonah, keep your book handy. Then I drove to Elise's office where the ficus continued to mind its business and the yellow pad had already chosen sides. We listened to the lunchtime conversation in the quiet that good rooms keep for difficult truths. Elise made exactly 2 notes and 1 phone call. Detective Salazar, she said when the other end answered, her voice set to honeyed steel. We have a timeline, recordings, financials, and a pattern that smells like undue influence crossed with fraud. No rush theatrics. We'll bring the binder at 4. She muted, looked at me. We're widening the circle responsibly. Elder wisdom reflection. From the friend who once taught me to fold a fitted sheet without swearing, when you're finally ready to tell it once to the person who can write it down properly. After that, you're not saving your own breath, you're saving your future. Salazar met us in a conference room that had respect in its drywall. He had a legal pad with a spine, a pen that didn't fidget, and the kind of patience that knows currency. We walked through the sequence. Pew, pills, envelope, hotels, points. Before the new year, baseline with Dr. Rao, the letter opener that looks like jewelry. He asked permission before pressing record, then let silence do half the work. We'll want copies of the audio, the bottle photo with the newspaper, Dr. Rao's letter, and the bank audit trail, he said. We'll look at attempted administration of a substance, conspiracy to commit financial fraud, and forgery if signatures don't sing right. Quirky fact he offered like a mint at the end of a hard lunch. The purple counterfeit pen at registers works by iodine reacting with resin in cheap paper. Real currency uses cotton linen, so it doesn't darken. Cheap forgery gives itself away chemically, he said.
Good forgery gives itself away by tempo. He tapped the signature that had my letters but not my rhythm. This hums wrong. We set a plan without staging it. Elise would invite them both to her office tomorrow at 9:30 to read together, with a notary present and coffee that doesn't lie. A uniform would be nearby, not to scare, only to remind the room that consequence is not a gossip. Salazar would not ambush, he would watch. Request copies, and, if cause ripened, serve papers later. We like boring endings, he said. They're safer. Light joke one. To the ficus, as we stood to leave, you deserve a raise for how often you've witnessed adults. It swayed without opinion, which is professionalism. I texted Vivian. Elise's office tomorrow at 9:30. We'll read slowly. No surprises. She replied, punctually. We'll be there. 10 minutes later, my phone rang with Graham's number and the old performance in the microphone. This is hostile, he said. This is adult, I answered, matching Elise's earlier vocabulary. We read at a table where paper knows its name. Night prepared itself cleanly. I cooked rice and boiled greens without asking them to be metaphors. Caleb came by to pick up a box of ornaments he'd left in my closet. Little wooden birds and 2 tarnished bells. He stood in the doorway like a grown man willing to be a son for a minute. Everything okay? He asked. We're practicing, I said. He nodded and didn't ask which instrument. He's learning what rehearsal looks like. Academic phrase of the day, undue influence doctrine, the public argument, especially in probate. That a will or transfer can be invalid if someone used a confidential relationship, pressure, or weakened capacity to overbear a person's free will. Critics argue about how to separate persuasion from coercion, autonomy from protection. I didn't say the term aloud. I taped it inside my notebook to keep my feet pointed. Morning arrived gray on purpose. I wore the jacket with the honest pockets and put the binder in the tote with a small paper knife laid across it like a bookmark. Elise's notary waited with a stamp that looked like it had paid taxes. I placed Dr. Rao's letter on the table and filled 2 glasses with water because the room wanted ordinary. They arrived precisely at 9:30, punctual like professionals. Vivian's face looked like someone had ironed it at the wrong temperature. Graham tried for pleasantly put upon and landed at shiny. We did the handshakes that rituals require. Elise explained the process in the tone you use for boarding a plane. We'll read every line. No one signs anything they haven't understood. If we need time, we take it. Graham pushed the draft forward. Elise slid it to the light. Distribution upon attending physician's opinion, she read, and circled it. Will require 2 independent evaluations and a cooling period. Vivian's mouth made a geometry I'd seen yesterday. Dr. Rao's letter stood, politely, where everyone could see it. Salazar entered, like punctuation, a soft knock, a badge held low, a smile that didn't perform. I'm here as a courtesy, he said. Please proceed. Graham's shoulders did the math and didn't like the sum. He tried a conversational pivot. Mara, you're making a scene. I kept my voice at bedtime. No, we are making a record. We read. Elise translated streamline back to reroute, clarify back to reassign, proactive back to hurry. The notary, to her credit, minded the stamps like religion. Vivian glanced once at the exit and then at me. Yesterday's lasagna had already done part of her work. This clause, she began, pointing to caregiving needs. Elise nodded. Ambiguous, brings litigation. Will specify and remove any 1 doctor triggers. Vivian's shoulders fell a centimeter. Graham's jaw clicked against the table's calm. Light joke. 2. To the stapler, as Elise made a clean packet of the corrected pages. You are the only one allowed to clamp down in here. The stapler obliged with a civil click. Salazar requested copies. Elise handed them, already tabbed. He slid them into an envelope and wrote the date on the flap like a man who taught paperwork kindergarten. Then his phone murmured. He stepped into the hall, returned with weather in his eyes, and spoke as gently as someone delivering late mail. "Mr. Ellison," he said, "I have a warrant related to financial records and a separate request that you come in to answer questions about a forged authorization and attempted administration of a sedative." Graham's performance found a new director. "This is ridiculous," he said, reaching for outrage and finding only a draft. The uniform at the door shifted, not a threat, a suggestion. "We'll cooperate," Elise said. "Professional snowplow. My client will provide her statement now." I spoke once, slowly, with nouns that behave: bottle, pew, envelope, baseline, hotels, points, phone, date. Salazar wrote like he was paying attention with money. "Thank you," he said. And when he turned to Graham, the room changed posture. "Sir?" Graham learned how large a conference room can be when you push the table with your knee and no one shoves back. He answered in fragments. Vivian answered in fewer. "Half a tablet," she said at last, not looking at me. "Kitchen counter, that's all." Salazar made a square on his pad. "That's not nothing," he said. Quirky fact. Offered by the notary when the silence needed a cup of water, the embossing seal leaves a dry impression that copiers don't catch well. That's why she always inks. 2. Paper needs both bite and die to behave in the courthouse. She stamped, inked, pressed. A miniature choreography of accountability. When they left with Salazar for a conversation downtown, the air resumed its regular weight. Elise exhaled like a kettle deciding against a whistle. "I'll trail them," she said. "You go home. Make soup, and put your binder in the fireproof pouch. Light joke 3. To the ficus, as it watched our parade of adults. We will add you to payroll if this continues." The ficus declined, stoic. At home. I texted Caleb. "Lunch here? Soup." He arrived with a face that knew snow wasn't the only weather. I sat him at the table and put the binder between us. Not like a weapon, like a map. "I'm not asking you to pick sides," I said. "I'm asking you to look at the part that isn't a story, dates, amounts, where people were when they said they were somewhere else." He looked. He breathed. He put 2 fingers against the table the way I do when I'm telling my pulse we're not on fire. "Okay," he said. "Okay. Adults will sort the adult parts," I said. "Your job is sleep and hydration and noticing when your chest wants to sprint." He almost smiled. "You're preaching your own gospel," he said. "Tea and nouns." We ate. He washed bowls. He took the trash out the way men announce they're staying without saying the embarrassing parts out loud. Elise called at 5. "He's under arrest on forgery and fraud," she said. "No bail tonight. Vivian's counsel is negotiating. She'll likely self-surrender on the attempted administration charge and cooperate." The words landed like careful luggage. "Thank you," I said. "What now?" "Paper and patience," she said. "We'll file restraining orders, we'll lock the financials, we'll let the quiet do some of the work." I wrote 3 lines in the ledger, told it once to the person who could write it down, read the paper in daylight, fed the people under my roof. The house approved in its unshowy way. I put Dr. Rao's letter back in the pouch, slid the binder in beside it, and taped a note inside the mug cabinet. Rest is not a pill, it's a practice. I made tea that doesn't lie, stood at the window, and watched the snow remember how to be one thing. Across town, a detective was labeling evidence bags, a notary was resting her stamp, a lawyer was filing something that would give the next day a spine. Here, soup bowls dried on a rack, and the little paper knife slept in a drawer with the other tools that looked like jewelry. We had not finished. We had, finally, begun. January made the air feel freshly sharpened. Elise filed the restraining orders. The bank completed its reversals. And the binder slimmed down as copies moved from my table to desks where stamps live. Detective Salazar called twice. Brief as weather, Graham was arraigned on forgery and attempted financial fraud. Released to his lawyer with travel limits and a lecture that sounded like kindergarten for adults. Vivian self-surrendered. Booked on attempted administration of a substance and conspiracy. Then released with conditions and a cooperation agreement that read like a stern parent. Elder wisdom reflection. Kneaded into me by a neighbor who once talked me through a flooded basement. Repair is mostly scheduling. Put the right person in the right room at the right hour with the right paper. And panic will choose a smaller chair. I kept a calendar that looked like a tiled floor you could walk across without worrying about what creaks. Dr. Whitaker sent a message through the portal and then showed up in person. Ty apologizing for him. I allowed familiarity to be used as authority, he said. Hands folded like a student at a desk. Your chart now carries a red banner alert. No sedatives. No cognitive affecting medications. No suggestions. Everything face to face with documented consent. I nodded, poured him tea, and let us both occupy the quieter word, boundary. Light joke 1. To the mug as it accepted his second pour. You're licensed for humility now. Keep your certification current. The mug steamed, virtuous. Quirky fact I learned at the courthouse while waiting for copies. Legal pads are canary yellow, some say, because the color reduces glare under gaslight and makes handwritten edits easier to spot. Others say the color simply hides a mess of recycled scraps. Either way. The 1.25-inch margin is called the downline, and scribbles there can change the day. I bought a pad, wrote nothing in the margin, and felt like I'd saved a small animal from being chased. Caleb came by evenings with a bag of groceries and the tired gratitude of a man younger than his burdens. We cooked what didn't perform, rice, greens, a chicken whose only ambition was doneness, and sat without staging our closeness. He didn't ask for details. I didn't give speeches. He did look at the binder once, hand hovering above timeline. I'm afraid if I read everything, my chest won't remember how to be a chest, he said. Then don't, I answered. Let paper carry what breath shouldn't. I'll tell you what changes your day. The rest is for ledgers and rooms with flags. Academic phrase of the day, plea bargaining. The public argument that trading a guilty plea for reduced charges or sentences keeps the system moving and spares victims the theater of trial. While critics warn it can coerce confessions, hide facts, and reward leverage rather than truth. Elise prepared me for both outcomes. Trials are loud manuals, she said. Plea deals are sticky notes. Either way, your boundaries have already done most of the teaching. In February. Vivian's lawyer reached out through Elise with a proposal that sounded like consequence attempting to behave. Plea to the attempt. Formal cooperation on the financial scheme. Testify if needed. Agree to restitution and a no-contact order except through counsel regarding logistics. She wants you to know, Elise said delicately, that the hotel wasn't romance, it was logistics. I thought of the lasagna that didn't lie and the way Vivian had set down her glass as if it might confess. She can keep her explanations, I said. I'll take her signatures.
Graham tried another route. 2 letters that read like a man auditioning for remorse. He asked to explain context and avoid spectacle, and suggested I keep family out of court. Elise slid the letters back across her desk with tweezers. He's learning to conjugate regret, she said. We will accept it later if the verbs come with restitution and quiet. Salazar called with a request for a victim impact statement in case we need one. I wrote mine in a voice that kept its shoes on, not a biography of hurt, just the geometry of what changed. Locks, sleep, trust in my own pulse. The hours I spent turning nouns into fences so my name could stop wandering out of rooms without me. I included a sentence that tasted like lemon. I prefer sentences that begin with I did over those that begin with I felt. And I prefer orders that protect over speeches that apologize. Light joke 2.
To the stapler as it closed around the statement, "You're the only one allowed to bite." The stapler obliged with a civil click. Caleb asked one night, voice careful, "Did he love her?" I put the ladle down so my answer wouldn't taste like panic. "He loved the door she opened," I said, "the way it let him exit the room where his mistakes lived. That's not love, that's evasion." He nodded once, as if translating. "Okay." He stared at his bowl. "What about me?" "He loves you," I said. "Separate from paperwork. Love doesn't erase what happens in ledgers. Ledgers don't erase what happens when you were 5 and he taught you to ride a bike without pretending not to be afraid." Caleb breathed. The soup steamed. We ate. It was enough for that hour. March put thin blue veins on the sky and court dates on the calendar. Vivian pled to the attempt and the conspiracy. Her cooperation filled the room with documents that stopped pretending to be errands. She received a probation term with stern conditions: community service, counseling, and an order never to handle my medical information or finances in any context. Her lawyer mailed a letter that didn't try to be poetry. I filed it under consequence, not understanding. Graham stood in court in a suit that wanted to look like dignity and admitted to forgery and attempted fraud. No prison, probation with guardrails sharp as new fences, restitution payments that behave like math, a long no-contact order that makes rooms taller, gambling treatment that will require him to sit in chairs that remember. The judge used pauses more than gavel and spoke like a person who prefers verbs to anecdotes. "You used her trust as a tool," he said. "Your sentence is learning to be someone whose tools are smaller and named." The clerk stamped the papers, and the future gained a few edges I could hold without bleeding. We left the courthouse with our coats open to the milder air. I bought Caleb a coffee that looked too serious for his hands, and we sat on a bench that didn't wobble. "Will you go?" he asked. "To watch him?" I shook my head. "My attendance isn't required for his learning," I said. "I show up where my name needs me." He watched a pigeon try and fail to act dignified with a French fry. "That seems fair," he said. Back home. I put the court orders in the fireproof pouch and rewarded the binder with a smaller ring. The house likes when paper learns to occupy less space. I wrote 3 lines in the ledger on the fridge. Orders in place. Money wears a leash. Medicine minding its own lane. Then I added a 4th. We eat at the table like it's a classroom for calm. Light joke 3. To the calendar as I crossed out a hearing date, "You are hereby reassigned from dread to recycling." Rosa came by with lemon bars that didn't have to testify. We sat at the table and decided where to hang a new photo. Caleb and me on the porch. Coats open. January light admitting it had tried its best. I put it in the hallway and walked past it a few times to make sure it told the truth. 2 people who preferred verbs to labels. Some days I still hear a phantom chime from a bottle that isn't in my purse anymore when that happens. I open the mug cabinet and read the tape note aloud. Rest is not a pill, it's a practice. I drink water on purpose and call no one. The house appreciates being the first responder. It rarely overreacts. By April, my ledger's handwriting loosened, as if the pen had finally trusted the paper. The kitchen smelled like citrus rather than adrenaline. Caleb put a magnet on the fridge shaped like a tiny goldfish and said, "For luck, not gambling." And I let myself laugh because specificity is a love language. Elise texted only on Thursdays unless something was on fire. Salazar stopped by once with paperwork and left with soup in a jar he promised to return. He did. The plan for what comes next is undecorated. We keep the orders renewed before they expire. We teach our phones not to answer unknown numbers. We give the bank a cake every time they behave. We cultivate boredom like a garden, and we let May arrive without asking it to make a speech. The binder naps in its drawer, lighter than winter, heavier than denial. The little paper knife sleeps with the chopsticks and the corkscrew, equal citizens in a drawer of tools that look like jewelry and turn out, blessedly, to be useful. By June, I had learned the names of the winds along the boardwalk and which bakery opened early enough to greet a photographer with decent coffee. The lease on a small apartment 2 blocks from the sea fit in my hand like a reasonable shell. The kitchen faced east. The window latch respected wrists. And the radiator snored like an old dog that meant well. On the dresser, my binder, lighter now, shared space with a modest camera I was learning to trust. I didn't flee. I changed air. The house in the city stayed mine with door sensors that minded their manners and a neighbor who took in mail as if it were gossip she refused to repeat. Elder wisdom reflection, folded from all the voices that carried me here after a storm. Sweep before you paint. Clear the grit. Tighten the screws. Let the wood dry and only then choose your color. Repair that hurries turns into more work. I kept the broom where I could see it. I let the paint wait until choosing felt like a sentence, not a shortcut. Caleb drove down 2 Saturdays each month, trunk innocent with groceries and a paper bag of lemons for bars I promised to teach him properly. We walked the pier, counted the birds, practiced not turning our heads when a siren played at the edge of the day. He told me he and Vivian were calendaring distance with courtesy. She sent updates through council like weather reports that only specified rain or sun. I kept our order pinned where the bills live and resisted the urge to edit fate with more nouns than it needed. Quirky fact for your pocket while you listen to waves. The frosted look of sea glass comes not only from tumbling, but from a slow chemical etching. Alkali leaches from the glass. And the surface blooms into tiny pits that scatter light into softness. It takes decades. In other words, time has a patient hand when it is tired of edges. I collected 3 pieces, no more, and let the rest return to their apprenticeship in the surf. Mornings I photographed humble things, railings that remembered wrists, gulls practicing exit strategies, a widow walking with her sister and 2 coffees. Light joke 1. To a gull that favored the trash can like a shareholder, "Sir, dividends are not served in public." He ignored me, which is how some investors behave. I took the shot anyway and sent it to a class I joined at the library where chairs are gentle to beginners. Academic phrase of the day. Therapeutic jurisprudence. The public argument that legal processes themselves can be shaped to reduce harm and support healing. Not merely to sort guilt from innocence. Advocates want courtrooms, orders, and procedures to behave like good hospitals. While critics worry about paternalism and mission creep, our judges' pauses felt like that theory learning how to walk. Our orders did not bruise. Our signatures were invited, not cornered. In the end, my name learned to wear rooms kindly again. Detective Salazar stopped by once on his day off with a jar. He said I'd forgotten. Soup, washed, a lid that no longer smelled like onions. "Trade," he said, handing me a postcard of the lighthouse. "For your wall." I pinned it near the calendar and promised myself there would be more small trades that cost no one sleep. Light joke 2. To the lighthouse in the picture. "Thank you for looking dramatic, so the rest of us don't have to." It complied, still and bright. Dr. Rao sent a note that used exactly the right verbs. Vitals remain boring. I wrote back, I aspired to boring, and meant it. Elise called rarely now, and when she did, it was to say a renewal had been filed. A payment posted. A guardrail checked. Miss Notary emailed a holiday card with a photograph of her embossing seal dressed in a tiny scarf. I laughed alone in my kitchen and decided joy is often brief because it likes to travel lightly. When December leaned in again, I hung a single strand of warm lights across the window and set 2 mugs on the sill to test the way the glass held glow. Caleb arrived with a cinnamon stick sticking out of his pocket like a bookmark and asked for the lemon bar recipe with the part where the sugar behaves. We measured carefully, sifted like snow, folded the zest into yellow that understood its job. Light joke 3. To the timer, as it tried to be important, we are in charge of brightness. You handle ding. It dinged with dignity. On Christmas Eve, we walked to the water where the town strings lights along the rail in polite colors. And I let the ocean do that old trick of making big noises sound like breathing. Caleb put his hands on the cool metal and said, "I didn't think this year could be quiet." "Quiet is earned," I said, "sometimes by other people's paperwork." We stood there long enough for coal to make itself understood. Then we went home, ate warm squares that sugared our fingers, and washed the pan without arguing about whose turn it was to dry. I mailed 3 cards the next morning, one to Elise with a photograph from the pier and the words "You built the table where the paper learned to speak," one to Dr. Rao with a tea packet and the line "I sleep because water and nouns," and one to Rosa with a pinstripe dish towel and the sentence corners have moods. The rest I kept simple. I am here. The window knows its latch. Soup tomorrow if you're near. When I finally opened the box of ornaments, I took out only the wooden birds. They perched along the bookshelf like punctuation. I left the rest wrapped. Not because I was afraid of memories, but because restraint tastes good when you've been overfed by drama. I made one promise out loud. To the apartment and the sea beyond it, in this place. Rest will be a practice, not a pill. And signatures will only arrive wearing daylight. The room agreed. The kettle sang its little B flat. The binder slept in a drawer with chopsticks and a corkscrew. Equal citizens now that emergencies had stopped auditioning. The season begins with a door that opens into cinnamon and pretends and a voice on a speakerphone practicing the shape of 3 million. Then widens into rooms where forks buy time and napkins become couriers. And finally grows into offices where ficus trees witness adults choosing paper over theater. A woman hears the quick mathematics of harm and answers with slow tools, a list written in good ink, a bottle photographed beside a newspaper, a baseline letter that refuses to be confused with a lullaby, a binder tabbed into medical, financial, legal, timeline, audio. She gathers quiet allies. Elise with honeyed steel, Jonah with a lens that does not humiliate, Dr. Rao with clean vitals, Salazar with pauses steadier than gavels, and walks her questions into daylight, choosing chairs over corners and windows over counters. Dinner becomes process. Lasagna does not lie. A paper knife reminds hands to read before cutting. The kitchen counterplan dissolves under porcelain and patience. The conference room learns people's true names. Signatures stop pretending to be care. There are charges and orders and restitution that behaves like arithmetic. There is a son who asks for only what helps his chest remember how to be a chest. There is a calendar that reassigns dread to recycling. And then the air clears enough to change its salt. And mornings open into sea light and a camera that trusts its own timing. Lemon bars become a recipe, not a metaphor. Wooden birds perch where labels used to sit. Rest is practiced, not prescribed, and a name, Mara, finds that it can stand in any room again without auditioning. The story closes softly, not with applause, but with a kettle's small song, a window's calm latch, and a promise that tomorrow will ask only for verbs we already know how to give.